أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وآل محمد واللعنة دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. The class that we're going to take at the moment revolves around building an Islamic household. And we started this class last year specifically. We took about maybe 4 or 5 lessons, give or take. And the reason I wanted to initiate this class specifically is that when we look at our societies, we find that many people go through spousal problems. So after marriage, you'll find a couple going through immense problems sometimes, which lead at times to divorce. Then again, you find parents also struggling with their children, or children struggling with their parents, so on and so forth. So looking at what the Quran al-Karim and what Ahlul Bait alayhim wassalatu wassalam have said on this regard is key. It's essential. Ahlul Bait and the Quran presented a significant amount of advice regarding spousal relationships, and also regarding the relationship of a parent with his or her child, or a child with his or her parent. So if we Shia communities, Shia societies simply look at Al-Quran and the words of Ahlul Bayt, and we analyze them carefully, we analyze their words carefully, salamullah alayhim, on this regard, meaning the words that spoke about spousal relationships, or the relationship of a father with his son, a mother with her daughter, so on and so forth. We will understand how to establish a Muslim family, how to establish a Muslim household. And since we're going through tough times, we're going through difficult times in which you see certain individuals drifting away from the straight path. You see a good amount of people who are called Muslimin. They say La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but they don't practice Islam properly. Due to that, I saw that it is essential to look at, the narrations, the Quranic verses and the narrations that speak about families and issues pertaining to Muslim families, to understand how can we establish a Muslim family, and once that's done, how can we preserve it? How can we protect, the faith and piety of not only ourselves but our wives and children, right? The faith and piety of our spouses or our children. So we mentioned a few points last year. Again, you can review the videos that are on YouTube. We mentioned, for example, the importance of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. Al-Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar, enjoining good and forbidding evil, and how a person is responsible of not only saving himself but also saving his family. Quran says it. The Quran says, "Qu anfusakum wa ahlikum naran waquduha an-nas wal hijara," which means that a person is responsible of saving himself and his spouse and his children from hellfire. Now, one question which came to the mind of certain individuals during the era of Ahlul Bait alayhim salam, meaning during the era of the apparent Imams salamullah alayhim, was, how can I save my family from hellfire, right? I mean, I don't have any control over them, right? I have control over myself, and even then, I don't know if I will be saved or not. It all depends on what I do and how my life comes to an end, correct? Meaning, it all depends on what I do and the state that I live prior to my death. So then, how can I save my family from hellfire? And the answer that Ahlul Bayt presented was what? Was that you command them to do what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you forbid them of doing what displeases God subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, I'm paraphrasing the narration, but this was the general meaning that Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam presented. Make sense? The last point we were looking at last year was the importance of getting married and how Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa encouraged the Muslimin to get married. The Muslimin, when you say Muslimin, we're talking about what? Muslim men and Muslim women. This was one of the deeds that Rasulullah highly emphasized on, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And it's a prerequisite to establishing an Islamic household, right? A Muslim household. How can you have a Muslim household, right, if you're not if you're not married? Correct? So it starts with what? With marriage. True? And it starts with choosing the right spouse. Choosing the right spouse. So this applies to both males and females. After looking at this point, we'll go into what Ahlul Bayt said alayhim salam in regards to children and how to raise our children, because they've presented a lot of advice, golden advice on this regard. So today we want to focus on a few traditions. I'm not sure how many traditions we'll be able to cover. A few traditions that spoke about marriage and encouraged the Muslimin to get married. Perhaps I've mentioned these traditions before, but in case I have, there's no harm in repeating them, as they say in Arabic, fil i'adati ifada. Right? When you repeat something, there is benefit that stems from that action. So the first narration we want to mention is a famous narration that I believe all of you have heard. Let me send it to the students who are online, and then we'll write it on the board. It's a short narration. This one is in Al-Kafi, Kitab Al-Kafi. So let's write down the hadith. Ya Rab. The hadith is in Al-Kafi, which is a Shia hadith book written by Shaykh al-Kulayni rahmatullah alayh during the era of the minor occultation. So al-Kulayni mentions a chain of narrators that goes back to Imam as-Sadiq an Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. The Imam said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. من تزوج أحرز نصف دينه وفي حديث آخر فليتق الله I'm going to translate it for you. Yeah. فليتق الله في النصف الآخر أو الباقي. A short and sweet hadith. من تزوج أحرز نصف دينه. So the Imam says that the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whoever gets married will have shielded, meaning he will have protected half of his religion, half of his faith. And then it says, وَفِي حَدِيثٍ آخر, there is another narration where there's a completion for this statement. He says, فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ فِي النِّصْفِ الْآخَرِ أَوْ الْبَاقِي. Thus let him fear Allah in regards to the other half or to the remaining half. Again, this is a famous narration that many of you or all of you have heard, but it's a very important narration. Very important. Because it shows us that marriage plays a vital role in protecting a believer's faith. So it plays a vital role in protecting our piety. Makes sense? Our taqwa. And piety is needed to be successful in the hereafter. Does marriage make you infallible? Do you get married? Do you become like, one of the prophets, alayhimus salam? No, you don't. Yeah, you don't become infallible. Hence the Prophet said in the other narration, فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهِ فِي النِّصْفِ الْآخَرِ. So let him fear Allah in regards to the other half. So you will still be in need of fearing Allah, reminding yourself of the truth, battling with your own self, what we call an-nafs al-ammara, so you may succeed. But what is a given is that marriage helps a person obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a helper, and it's a big helper, because the Prophet said he will have shielded half of his faith. He could have said, 1/8, 1/6 of his faith. No, he said 50% of your faith will be protected. Through what? Through marriage. So it's a very important hadith because it reminds us of one major and beautiful effect that marriage has on those who get married. But the question is, how does it protect a person from indecency? When the Prophet says it protects a person's faith, as in it protects half of his faith, what is he referring to here? Several points come to mind. The first one, which is quite evident, quite obvious, is that marriage protects a person from sins pertaining to carnal desire. Right? That's a given. But it also has other benefits. Okay? So let's write down benefits of marriage. Obviously, we're not going to mention every single benefit. We don't have time for that. Okay, I just want to mention a few benefits and then we'll continue. Number one, as we said, it protects a person, again, to a certain extent, from sins pertaining to carnal desire. Because it allows the person to practice his desire in a lawful way, in a way that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there are other benefits that are really important. A second benefit is it pushes a person away from suicide. This point, seems a bit funny, but it's true. It is true. Unfortunately, suicide is a problem in our era. It's a problem. جيد. And you have, unfortunately, some movements that are encouraging the youth to commit suicide. God forbid. Marriage does the opposite. It pushes you away from suicide. Why? Well, for various reasons. Number one, when you have a spouse, that spouse turns into a source of sukoon, a source of tranquility. A husband finds tranquility, spiritual tranquility, through the presence of his wife, and vice versa. Right? Again, we're talking about the good husband and the good wife. Someone might tell me, you know what? My wife turns my life into a living hell. That's different. Jayid. Or my husband turns my life into a living hell. That's different. I'm not talking about bad husbands or bad wives. A good husband is a source of tranquility for his wife, and a good wife is a source of tranquility for her husband. So when you have that sukoon, when you have that spiritual tranquility, obviously you'll be what? You'll be more distant from committing suicide. Why would you commit suicide? You're sakin, you're stable, you're tranquil. So why would you even attempt killing yourself? Then again, after some time, a year, 2 years, 5 years, God knows, Allah usually blesses the couple with what? With children. And when you're blessed with children, you're blessed with these, human beings who came out of you. They're part of you, right? Imam al-Amir alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, has a beautiful, lengthy piece of advice, what we call wasiyah, that he gave to Imam al-Hasan, salawatullah wa salamu alayh. And in it, he tells him, وَجَدْتُكَ بَعْضِي, I found that you were part of me. Then he tells him, بَلْ وَجَدْتُكَ كُلِّي, in fact, I found that you were all of me. Right? A parent, a good parent, views that his child is what? Is, a tiny individual who was one day part of him. It's as if it's a second him. It's a second, Abu Ali, or second Abu Ja'far, second Abu Musa. That's how the good parent looks at his child. So he tells him, وَجَدْتُكَ بَعْضِي, I found that you were part of me. بَلْ وَجَدْتُكَ كُلِّي, in fact, I found that you were all of me. Again, I'm paraphrasing the narration. Okay? يعني عم برويها بالمضمون. So when you have these children who become part of your life, you also become more distant from committing suicide. Why? Because they depend on you and they need you. At the same time, you love them. You don't want to separate from them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates that emotional attachment between the parent and his child, and the child and his parent. That attachment is good because it keeps the parent away from what? Away from certain sins, one of which is suicide. One might think that, I'm just speaking my own ideas here, but these ideas are actually based on evidence. Review, for example, Statistics Canada. Okay? The government realized that the amount of people who committed suicide who were single, the amount of people who were single and committed suicide exceeded the amount of people who were married and committed suicide. And according to what I remember, this applied to either the youth or people in general in Canada. So why would the number of people who are single who committed suicide exceed the number of people who were married who committed suicide? Because of what we just mentioned. When you're married, marriage itself, it drives you away from suicide or suicidal thoughts. Again, it doesn't stop you from doing it. If you want to commit suicide, you can commit it at the end of the day. But you're going to have to face its consequence, which is what? which is dwelling for eternity in hellfire, God forbid. Makes sense? So that's a second effect, which is very important. A third effect is enhancing a person's patience. That's also a very important effect, which helps you what? Which helps you become a better person and become a stronger person. Patience, my friends, my brothers, my sisters, is an essential part of our faith. In fact, Ahlul Bait tell us, salamullah alayhim, that without patience we can't be faithful. If someone has zero patience, it means he has zero faith. The Imam says, Man la imana liman la sabra lahu. Someone does not have patience at all, zero patience, it means he has no faith. Any part of Islam, any part of faith is in need of patience. Even if it's, a simple part or an easy part of Islam. For example, doing wudu at the time of Fajr requires patience, especially on a cold night when the water is not too warm. It needs patience. Fasting Shahr Ramadan needs patience. Doing Hajj needs patience. Hijab needs patience. So on and so forth. Avoiding, unlawful desires. Things that you desire, but they're unlawful. It requires patience. So marriage will help you become a better person, a better believer, because it will enhance your patience. How will it enhance your patience? Well, when you get married, you're living with someone else. And then, after a while, as we said, usually Allah blesses you with children. So previously you were one person, then you became what? Two. And you became 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 individuals living under the same roof. That requires patience because, each individual has his own, how can I say this? His own personality, right? Sometimes conflicts take place, disagreements take place, disputes take place. So patience is required. In order to understand your spouse, you need patience. In order to properly raise your children, you need patience. So marriage itself, if you are a proper husband, a good husband, or a proper wife, a good wife, or a good parent, marriage itself will do what? Will increase the level of your patience. And with that, you'll become a greater human being. You'll get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are 3 benefits of marriage. Not to say that these are the only benefits, there are others. But these are 3 main benefits that one acquires from marriage. Now we have a better understanding why Rasulullah said, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, man tazawwaja ahraza nisfa dinihi falyattaqi Allah fi النصف الآخر أو فليتق الله في النصف الباقي. Another narration, which I won't write down, but I'll send it to the students who are online. The students who are present in class, you can write the source. The narration is found also in Al-Kafi. Afwan? Al-Kafi, you mean? Write Al-Kafi? Sure, no problem. Yeah. I've sent the students who are online the hadith, the second one. Yalla, 1 second, sorry. Okay. So the hadith, the second one we're going to mention and explain, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is also found in the book Al-Kafi for Shaykh Al-Kulayni. It's in the chapter called Bab Karahatil Uzbah. So the chapter that speaks about how it's disliked to remain single. Okay? Really? It's disliked to remain single? Yes. We said Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi highly encouraged the Muslimin to get married. So this narration says what? It says Abu Abdullah alayhi salam said, قال أمير المؤمنين, the commander of the faithful said, تزوجوا, get married. This is the word of Ali. فإن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال من أحب أن يتبع سنتي فإن من سنة التزويج. Because the messenger of Allah said, whosoever would like to follow my sunnah, meaning my teachings and my habits, let him know that part of my sunnah, part of my teachings and habits is what? Marriage. At-tazweej is to get married. So it's as if the Prophet is saying, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, if you want to be a true Muhammadi, a true Muslim, you want to follow the footsteps of your Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, then get married. Because your Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi highly encouraged marriage. And he himself got married, not to one lady, rather to multiple women. Sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. What is it? Yes.
I have it here from Al-Quran, volume 2, page 648.
Mhm.
It Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whoever said, whoever likes to follow my tradition should get married, as marriage is part of my tradition. Is that it or no?
Yes, that's it's saying the same meaning, but the one I'm reading is from Al-Kafi. Yeah. Sometimes you'll have a hadith. You'll have the same hadith mentioned in multiple sources. Yeah. Sometimes you'll have a different hadith mentioned in another source, but it conveys the same meaning. Yeah. These narrations, my brothers and sisters, are really important, especially these days, because we realize that for one reason or another, the youth of this day and age are delaying their marriage. Not all youth, but some are. Some brothers, some sisters keep on delaying marriage. They delay it, they delay it, they delay it. Again, for one reason or another. They'll tell you, mathalan, we'll get married when we are in our 30s, or maybe even when we are in our 40s. And Islam says, la, that's too late. Get married before that. You need it. It protects you. You need to be protected from indecency. And marriage will not stop you from getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, it does come with some sort of restriction or restrictions, but who said restriction or restrictions are bad? Having some restrictions is good. When these restrictions stop me from doing what's wrong, from doing what displeases God subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're good restrictions, they're not bad. باب كراهة العزبة. Others might tell you that, I want to learn. I want to pursue my education. And, for that reason, I don't want to get married. No one said that if you get married, you can't learn. You can continue learning after marriage. There's no problem in that. Absolutely no problem. There's no Quranic verse saying that, marriage is the end of your educational journey. It's not. There's no hadith saying after marriage you're not allowed to open a book. On the contrary, a Muslim should seek knowledge from what? From the cradle to the grave, right? اطلبوا العلم من المهدي إلى اللحد, the Prophet says, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So reminding ourselves of these narrations is necessary because, as we said, in this day and age, you have a good amount of youth who are delaying their marriage, thinking that this is something right, that this is something good. When in reality, when you keep on delaying marriage, it comes with consequences. Delaying marriage comes with negative consequences, negative effects. God forbid. Another narration I'd like to read on this regard is one pertaining to Imam al-Baqir, actually Imam al-Sadiq, and they're both one light. Salamullahi alayhima. And I think we'll conclude with this narration. This one proves to us that marriage does not stop a person from reaching high levels of faith or perfection or from getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, it does come with responsibilities. Yes, when you do get married and you have children, you have less time for yourself. That's true. But who says having less time for yourself will make you distant from God? On the contrary, it might bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These responsibilities that you acquire after marriage, whether you're a he or a she, these responsibilities, you can use them as a means, as a wasila, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have, for example, mesmerizing narrations about the reward of a man who seeks sustenance, who goes out and works to bring, food and sustenance for his family. Traditions considered that man, the person who, hires himself, who goes through a lot in order to bring sustenance for his family, like one who's doing jihad, like a person who's battling the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then again, the lady who takes care of her house, who upholds her house chores, the reward speaking about what she receives for simply, for example, moving one item from one place to another. These narrations are beyond mesmerizing. Perhaps we'll read them one day. We have detailed narrations on the reward a lady gets for simply being what? A housewife. A lady who takes care of her house. She cleans, she sweeps, she washes the dishes. Imagine there's a big reward for simply moving one item from one place to another with the intention of what? Of fixing her house or making her house neater. Subhanallah. Right. What is the narration that we wanted to mention? And we'll conclude the session with this tradition. It's also found in Al-Kafi. وشيخ الكليني رحمة الله تعالى عليه. This one is in a chapter called كراهية أن تتبتل النساء ويعطلن أنفسهن. I'll write it down for you and then I'll read the tradition. So the second narration is in Al-Kafi, in which chapter? Bab كراهية أن تتبتل النساء ويعطلن أنفسهن.
Oh, is that the same one or a different one?
This is a different chapter. Yeah. So Shaykh al-Kulaini mentions, rahmatullah alayh, a sanad. He mentions a chain of narrators which goes back to Abd al-Samad ibn Bashir. Abd al-Samad ibn Bashir said what? He said, دخلت امرأة على أبي عبد الله عليه السلام. A lady entered upon Abu Abdullah, meaning Imam al-Sadiq salawatullah alayh. فقالت أصلحك الله إني امرأة متبتلة. She told the Imam, I am a lady who is mutabattila. What does mutabattila mean? She will explain. The Imam will ask her. But bear in mind, the literal meaning of batil means qata, severing something. Okay? So he said, فَقَالَ وَمَا التَّبَتُّلْ عِنْدَكِ? Meaning, when you say, I am a mutabattila, what do you mean? What is this state of tabattul that you are talking about? As in, it seems that, perhaps the Imam is telling her, alayhi salam, it seems that you're cutting yourself off of something. What are you cutting yourself off of? So she said, قالت لا أتزوج. She said, I am abstaining from marriage. I don't want to get married. قال ولما? Said, why? قالت التمس بذلك الفاضل. She said, I am seeking to achieve a higher level of perfection or a higher level of proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this kind of abstinence. So she was thinking that if I refrain from marriage, I'll become, a greater human being, or I'll become someone closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, someone that Allah loves more. What did the Imam say, alayhi salam? فَقَالَ انصرفي. He told her, leave. فلو كان ذلك فضلا لكانت فاطمة عليها السلام أحق به منك. The Imam told her, if what you were doing was actually good, if what you're doing is actually good and actually brings a person closer to Allah or brings a person to a higher level of perfection, then Fatima alayha salatu wassalam would have done this before you. لكانت فاطمة عليه السلام أحق به منك. She would have advanced you and would have done this deed before you. إنه ليس أحد يسبقها إلى الفضل. He told her, no one can advance Fatima al-Zahra alayha salatu wasalam and beat her to what? To virtue or excellence, or to doing something which brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or brings you to a higher level of perfection. So long story short, he was telling her, you made a mistake. Fatima al-Zahra alayha salatu wasalam was the greatest lady that Allah ta'ala created. No lady is closer to Allah than her. And Fatima got married. So if abstinence from marriage was required, Fatima would have done it before you. Salamullahi alayha. Make sense? جيد. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين.